Alright, so easily my favorite announcement for this year's BlizzCon is Diablo 4. And in this video, I want to share with you everything that we know about the game so far. By the way, can I record a Diablo video while wearing a StarCraft shirt? Yeah, whatever. Alright, so all the information I want to share with you today comes from the opening cinematic as well as the opening ceremony, the panels that followed shortly after. I've watched a couple of developer interviews, and I also got to play the game here, the demo, for about like 20 to 30 minutes or so. By the way, pretty cool. You can actually see BlizzCon right here from my hotel room. Alright, so yesterday while walking into the Anaheim Convention Center, they had like banners set up pretty much everywhere, indicating that during the opening ceremony there would be some like sensitive content. And I figured that this would be, this would be a little bit over the top, some sort of like American regulation or something along those lines. But honestly, like the opening cinematic is one of the creepiest and bloodiest things I've seen in a little while when it comes to video games. It's extremely dark, it's very, very long, and it's actually like properly creepy and not family friendly whatsoever. In case you haven't seen the trailer yet, I'll go ahead and post some clips here and there in this video, as well as a link down below to the full video in the description of this one. Alright, so the story of Diablo 4 takes place decades after the conclusion of A Reaper of Souls. In the cinematic, we can watch Lilith return. She's the mother of humanity, and she's supposed to reflect the evil side that is inside of every person. On top of that, she's actually also Mephisto's daughter, so there is a link right there to the greater evils. And at this point, we don't really know exactly why she was summoned in some sort of creepy like blood sacrifice, but at the very least, she's back. So Diablo 4 is your classic isometric action RPG. So Blizzard has built an entirely new engine specifically for Diablo 4, and listening to the opening cinematic as well as all of the different panels, I think they must have used the word dark about 1,000,000 times. Okay, maybe not 1,000,000, but at least like 100 times. So first off, the regions that will be in the game. Apparently there's gonna be 5 different zones, and the zones are actually significantly bigger than the ones that we have in Diablo 3. It got to the point apparently where they are introducing mounts into the game because that is how big the zones actually are. So the mounts are going to be customizable, and they very specifically mentioned, and I do like this, that there's not going to be any unicorn ponies. They really are trying to go for a really grim and very dark vibe. There are weather changes as well as day and night cycles, and actually really cool, I noticed this in the demo as well, there are no more borders inside of a zone. So say you're descending into a dungeon, your character actually just simply climbs down a portal, and there's not actually like any loading screens while you're inside of a zone. Everything just fluidly moves into the next area. So at least in the demo, there are several hubs that I came across where you can pick up different quests, you can group with other people, you're supposed to be able to trade as well, although that wasn't quite in the demo just yet. And essentially it's supposed to be a social section, just like you have in, for example, like a Path of Exile, where you can meet with other players and decide what you're going to be doing next. Although apparently it is possible to complete the game 100% without ever grouping up. So if you're more like a solo player, like I personally am most of the time, you do have that option. Now in the main panel that followed after the opening ceremony, they did mention that they will include fast travel, so you can quickly port around the world if you need to. Probably from like the main hub in every single zone, just because that way you can actually make your way across the world if you need to group up with someone else or you have another task to accomplish. Now, one of the things that I personally really missed in Diablo 3 is proper player versus player, and in this game, they already announced it. I mean, they did that with Diablo 3 as well, but they did mention that World PvP will be part of the game, so that should be a lot of fun. Okay, so besides 5 zones, there should be hundreds of dungeons that are significantly darker than the world that's above. And it's still very much so obviously a dungeon crawler, so all of the dungeons are randomized and randomly generated. You're going to be able to get a lot of loot, you're going to be able to fight a lot of different enemies, and that way you should slowly progress and get a more powerful character. Now, of course, just like with previous Diablo games, you can obtain legendary gear. Apparently, the legendary gear this time around won't really be as set focused like it is in Diablo 3, but it does have different unique abilities. Now, I secretly hope that it won't be like Diablo 3 in the sense that you can get like dozens in an hour. I always kind of prefer it when it's a lot more unique and something that you don't obtain all the time. During the testing, actually, during like my 20 to 30 minutes or so of playtime, I actually got 2 pieces of legendary gear, so I don't know if I just got extremely lucky, because I did ask some of the other people that already played, and they didn't get a single piece. So maybe that's like YouTuber luck or something like that, I'm not sure. Alright, so at launch, there will be 5 different classes, of which 3 have been revealed so far. So first off, we have the Sorceress. She's your classic elemental spellcaster. Secondly, we have the Barbarian, just brutal combat with lots of physical weapons. And they've introduced something called the Arsenal system, where you can apparently have up to 4 weapon slots while switching freely in the middle of combat. So you can have both single and dual wielded weapons in the same build. Now the punches and hits that I noticed in the gameplay trailer, they sounded and they felt really good. So I hope that is the case as well when you actually play a Barbarian. Now during my own playtime, I got to play the Druid. And I'm not gonna lie, it's nice to go back in time. The Druid played like an absolute charm. You're constantly switching form. You go between like a werebear, I think is what they called it, and then like a werewolf. You have a couple of animal companions with you as well. And the combat, it felt super clean. It felt much better actually than Diablo 3, which, as far as at the very least like the combat goes, I personally much prefer over Path of Exile, but we'll come back to that in a second. They're also introducing proper character customization, so no longer do you just have like 1 or 2 different versions of one character. They actually plan on adding like a proper set of character customization options, so that should always be good. Now, speaking of customization, I think the real challenge with a game like this is having a unique playstyle, right? Like, you don't want to have like a pre-built, like optimized strategy, because it just takes away so much from the experience. And I think that's one of the problems that a lot of people have with Diablo 3. Like, the game is very much so focused on set bonuses and all that, and while they do occasionally change, you can't really like pick a build that you really like fantasize and play that. I mean, technically the option is there, but it's gonna be very, very inferior to some of the pre-built sets that Blizzard intends right now. So with Diablo 4, they're introducing a talent tree, there are skill ranks, rune words, and then also legendary items. Now, like I already said, those legendary items, they do have some set bonuses as well, but they specifically mentioned that they don't want those set bonuses to dominate like they do in Diablo 3. People are screaming outside. Can you hear that? Oh, I've heard of this. I think this is what they call like the March of the Murlocs, where basically there are a lot of people that dress up like a Murloc and then they just walk around. Alright, so next up, let's talk about the graphics of Diablo 4. So here's the thing. Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 are very dark, very gritty, very like gothic and very, I guess, occultist games. They are pretty scary to play. Whereas Diablo 3, I mean, it went a lot more in the direction of like, say, for example, World of Warcraft, right? I mean, the game is by no means family friendly, but it's a lot more cartoony and a lot more colorful, and I personally don't really like that art style so much. Now, Diablo 4 goes back to the roots, so you've probably already noticed it in some of the gameplay. It's much darker, it's got a lot more like lightning effect, and it seems a lot more dramatic. The characters also look way more realistic, and I think in general, it looks really good. I mean, for me, I'm secretly hoping it's gonna look even more dark, like the deeper you descend into different dungeons. Alright, so I've read a lot of the forum posts and Reddit threads and whatnot surrounding Diablo 4, and it's very noticeable that Diablo 3 has left a very sour taste in people's mouths. So for those of you unfamiliar, Diablo 2 did extremely well back in the day, and when they announced Diablo 3, it looked extremely promising, but the launch was absolutely awful. And while it's a good game right now, I personally think Diablo is in a pretty sweet spot right now. It had such a tough start with like the Real Money Auction House and a whole bunch of other things that were going on in that game. Like, I remember Era 37. Do you guys remember Era 37? That was a mess. But basically, Diablo 3 had a rough start, and because of that, the game, while it sold well, it never was particularly popular. There's also a lot of people talking about how they may have very well planned additional expansions for Diablo 3 initially. So obviously we had the release of Reaper of Souls, but that's kind of where that game ended. Apparently they may have very well been planning on releasing additional expansions, but because the start of Diablo 3 was so bad, it left a sour taste in people's mouths, and because of that, it never really took off, not at the very least in the way that Blizzard probably intended. So if you look up sales numbers actually, Diablo 3 still sold extremely well, but that is probably primarily due to the success of Diablo 2, right? Everyone that played Diablo 2 and liked it just sort of bought Diablo 3 as well. Now, since the release of Diablo 3, most of the people that enjoy the action RPG genre, and that includes myself as well, have long switched over to another game called Path of Exile. And that will be the direct competitor that Diablo 4 will have to deal with. That game has so much depth, it's got a ton of endgame content, and there's a million ways that you can play your character. Now, I hope that they're gonna be able to, at the very least, be like a great competition to that game. I think one of the main things that it comes down to is end game content, right? I mean, the game right now, like Diablo 4, it looks extremely promising. I think the art style and just the way and the fluidity, I guess, of combat and the way you maneuver around the map is vastly superior to that of Path of Exile. But it all comes down to like replayability and whether or not you're actually gonna be able to continue playing the same character for longer than, say, a couple of days after you complete the main stories. I think that at the release of Diablo 4, and I hope that they've learned from Diablo 3's launch, it needs to have all of the things in place already for it to be a successful game. I think it's absolutely critical that at the release of Diablo 4, it's got all of the different endgame content pieces already in place. I think it would be really bad if they release part of the game and then later on, like say like a year plus after the release of the game is when they finally add in seasons, or for example, they add in PvP and all that later. I think everything has to be in place right at the very beginning of Diablo 4 for it to be a smash hit, because it got all of the potential. I think right now, like Diablo 3 is a really good game, but a lot of people are not really willing to give it a try anymore. I think if they make it a combination of like the feel of Diablo 2, the fluidity and combat of Diablo 3, and then the customization of Path of Exile, if they like create like somehow like a hybrid of all of that, it's got a ton of potential, and I'm personally really looking forward to it. Alright, so during the demo, I gotta be honest with you, I didn't want to stop playing yet. I had a timer that basically ran down to 0 seconds in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. I was a little bit disappointed that I had to give up my computer to someone else. So like I said, I decided to play the Druid, and all of the combat abilities felt extremely satisfying. There's something about the combat, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but all of the punches and different abilities that the character had felt really good. I mean, I don't really get that feeling with, like, for example, the Barbarian in Diablo 3, and I don't really get that in, like, Path of Exile or Grim Dawn either. Anyways, the combat is extremely satisfying, the sound effects are really good, and while the graphics definitely are still a little bit rough around the edges, they don't seem to want to release this game anytime soon. So I believe that that is one of the things that they can easily fix over the course of the next couple of years. And really, that's I guess the main thing that we need to discuss next, right? When is this game coming out? Well, they specifically mentioned it's not gonna be soon, and it's not even gonna be like Blizzard soon. So I'm assuming that we will probably hear more about the development of Diablo 4 at 2020's BlizzCon, so next year. And I wouldn't expect a release really any sooner than, say, like 2021. It'll probably be a while. But hey, I'm looking forward to it though. It played really well. I love the fact that this is such a small thing, right? But I went down into a dungeon, and rather than like having a loading screen while going into Drowning Pool level 2, my character actually climbed down a staircase and it just all smoothly moved on. There were a lot of cutscenes in between as well that I think were loading screens, but I'm not entirely sure, because I mean, it was basically a cutscene where I saw my character, like, you know, basically crawling out of like a pool of blood with a bunch of skulls in it and stuff. And I think during that, it probably loaded the main world, but it felt a lot more fluid. Like, there weren't any like hard breaks in the middle of gameplay, which I definitely really liked. So hey, the game looks promising. I'm definitely gonna keep an eye out on the development of this title. Let me know down below in the comment section of this video what you think of it so far. Hey, but for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I will see you once again in the next one.